really special webinar slash Q&A happening today. We have three very respected jazz musicians in the field here in Detroit and outside of Detroit. Three people who I consider beacons of how to act, how to play, how to conduct a career. They do it all the right way. They've made great decisions. All three have come out of the jazz studies kind of path through school, and they've taken the lessons they've learned at school, but also have kind of figured some stuff out on their own to make a career for themselves and have maintained it. So can we give a warm welcome to Kasan, Belgrave, Michael Malice, and James Hughes? Thanks for coming, guys. Okay, so could I have each of you guys maybe introduce yourselves and tell us a little about you? Kasan, why don't you start?
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Kasan Belgrave. I play alto saxophone, tenor, flute, clarinet. I graduated from University of Michigan, class of 2019. Also attended Michigan State University for graduate school under Rodney Whitaker and Diego Rivera. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. My father, Marcus Belgrave, was a great trumpet player. He was a big educator. That was one of his big things. People, see him as a musician, but he very nurtured the Detroit music youth throughout 40 plus years. And I was lucky enough to meet everybody that he was friends with and colleagues with. And for me, I'm 25 now, trying to get my foot in the education door, as well as continuing to perform. I've had a pleasure with just being on the road with Jazz at Lincoln Center with Wynton Marsalis this past month, and that was a huge musical opportunity and, I guess, learning experience for me. And yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me, Scott, and everybody else.
Absolutely, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here. Michael Malice, someone I've known for a long time. Both of us share the same piano teacher back when we were in high school with Bess Bonnier, and it's been a pleasure to see to work alongside you, to see your career grow, and just to see what you've accomplished. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, Scott's leaving out a part of the story, which is that after I studied with Bess Bonnier for 2 years, I studied with Scott for a year as well. So he was an early mentor of mine when I was in high school, and he was like a generation older than me, and I've looked up to Scott for a really long time. So I'm really happy to be here. So my name is Michael Malice. I am a pianist and composer. I live in Detroit, Michigan. I grew up in Grosse Pointe and was grateful to at an early age kind of be introduced to jazz via Kasan's dad, via Marcus Belgrave, at the Detroit Symphony Orchestra's civic jazz program. That was like some of my earliest exposure to this music when I was a young high schooler. And like Scott said, I was also studying with Bess Bonnier at the time, so that was kind of my early indoctrination right there. Went to the University of Michigan, graduated class of 2011. I did a double degree in jazz studies and English. So I'm someone who's really interested in like wide paths, and I think that's probably going to be something that I'm going to be talking about. Is I just have always had a lot of different interests, and that's served me really well. So when I was at U of M, I did double degree in English and jazz studies. I studied with Jerry Allen while I was there. And then I took 5 years off between my undergrad and my master's degree. And I was basically working as a professional musician in Detroit, working a lot with Kasan's dad, actually, with Marcus and with other people. And I really felt that era for me was an era where I wanted to just learn more and more and play with elders and try to grow as much. Went back to school in 2017 for a master's at Wayne State, where I studied composition and theory there. And I have been out of school since then and working, performing, composing, and teaching and putting out records for the last 8 years. So that's a little bit about what I do. A lot of what I do is kind of self-driven, self-motivated, because a lot of my work starts with me as a composer and moves from there. So working, to get that music out, and then also working with like ensembles that I lead or other ensembles to kind of create pathways for my work as a composer as well. So yeah, thrilled to be here.
Cool. Thanks, Michael. Could you turn your microphone up just a little bit?
Yep. Sorry about that. I think I really have to talk directly into it. Is this better?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Cool. And then James, we've known each other for years and years now. It seems like went to Wayne State together, and actually one of my first friends there. And I'm pleased to still be able to play with you to this day. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Scott. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And nice to see so many friendly faces. Yep, I went to Wayne State. I see Professor Teeny there. Nice to see you, Doc. Yeah, so I went to Wayne State right out of high school. I was all set to go to Michigan Tech to study chemical engineering, actually. And Wayne State offered me an academic scholarship. So I thought, oh, well, this is like free money, free schooling. So I thought I should study something that I'm just interested in, where I don't have to be concerned about making a living, and just study something for the pure enjoyment of studying it. And I thought, I love music, and I was more of a piano player than a saxophone player, actually. And because I was so late in applying, the only people that were working at the time in the summer was the jazz department. Matt Michaels was there. And he said, yeah, come on down, I'll audition you. Because I wanted to study composition and be like in the comp side of things. But no other music professors were there at the time. And so he said, yeah, come on down to the 5900 2nd Street there, the old mortuary science building that was the jazz building at the time. And Russ Miller was there, and they told me, they found out, they were asking me questions ahead of time. They wanted me to bring my saxophone, because I think they were trying to recruit me in the jazz department more than the comp. They were trying to cherry pick me because they wouldn't have to pay. They could get a free student that way. So it worked. Auditioned on saxophone, and I was like, oh, can I play some piano? They're like, no, you're in. We need a saxophone player, and Russ's big band. So, I was just, that's how I got started at Wayne. And then the reason I give all that detail is because I ended up, I'm studying with Chris Collins then. He was I think he was just adjunct at the time, and was in the middle of really developing himself as a professional. So he was in the woodshed 8 hours a day, and to have that as a role model, I was like, whoa, this is so intense. This guy is just I think he was just at the time just teaching maybe one class and then taking all the jazz sax students, and so he was just in his office practicing all day. And that had an impact on me. Obviously, it's I wasn't even aware of that was possible. And then I studied with Larry Nazaro after that. And when I was done, I tried to wrap things up at Wayne so that I could get the most out of my scholarship. So I was taking 21 credits a semester, and working some part-time jobs to pay for me to go out at night and go to jazz clubs and jam sessions. And then I just started working. People started hiring me before I graduated, and then I wasn't even planning on having a career in music. So it's funny that I'm here, because it wasn't something I was planning on doing. It just started happening. People started hiring me, and I started quitting. I worked part-time at Harmony House so I could get free records. And then I started working in music too much, where I had to drop some of those other jobs. And I always was teaching. And so at that moment, I think I was 21 years old, and I said, I'll give myself, I moved out of the house and everything. I was like, I'll give myself until I'm 25. And if I can't make a living, then I'll just go back, and I'll go back up north and go to Michigan Tech and go back to chemical engineering. And so I was like, by the time I was 25, I was too busy and work. I never even remembered that I set that time frame for myself. So that's, I'm 47 now, so I've just been keeping busy. Like Art Blakey said, either you're appearing or disappearing. So
That's a good one.
Well, James, you've definitely created a career for yourself. It's been awesome to play alongside you in so many different groups and all the different things besides just the performing that you do too, to enhance your musicality, and make ends meet, as they say. All three of you guys had goals in college, of course, like we all do. Kasan, what were some of your goals in college, and how have they changed to your present day? Now you're 25, you said, right? What were your goals, and what are they now?
Well, actually, I didn't really know my goals in high school. I knew my goals like long term, but I didn't know what to accomplish within like 4 years. Honestly, had like a hard time with the curriculum of music schools, because they were so, the way I learned growing up, being around my father and like with everybody else too, like, outside of the university and institutional structure that is of like a music school, there's, in jazz especially, you get to go out to, like, the main way to learn jazz music is to go out to, the clubs and jazz venues and to hear, these great musicians live play, and also to interact with them too. And sometimes when you get stuck in the institutional education, educational structure, I feel like sometimes, well, for me at least, it was hard. It was hard to get up at 8 a.m., go to classical theory, taking, all the required classes, in a musical curriculum, especially like a great institution like University of Michigan. So for me, it was hard to adjust. So I didn't really know what my goals were at the time. I knew I wanted to play professionally, especially in like the Detroit area, the Ann Arbor area, Michigan, Ohio, and then make my way to New York at some point. And so, I didn't really have my goals panned out, but as I started playing more, as every year went by, I learned more in school. Then I started to kind of say, okay, well, I kind of narrowed my path of which musical direction I wanted to take. And so, I was writing like these big band charts that had like a little bit of fusion of like, hip hop, or, like rap, or like having like a kind of like an orchestral sort of sound. I knew kind of what I wanted like to my music to sound like at the end of 4 years. And so going to grad school at Michigan State, I kind of, my goals changed a little bit, and I had more of like a direct connection to New York, and all the musicians and the gigs in New York. So, I've been thinking about moving to New York or like Los Angeles, because I had, more of an exposure with, Rodney, and being all, around all these great alumni that have graduated from MSU, And so my point is like goals always change and you kind of never know what you want to do. You kind of know it's like easy to think about long-term kind of goals that you want to reach, but like in short term and like the moment, sometimes you don't really know. It's probably different with Mike and James because they're like, they have their music out. I don't really have my product out into the world yet, so I can't really tell like what it's leading for me. Maybe Mike or James could talk about that too. But yeah, my point is like your goals are always changing and times always change, so you have to adapt to it. Like you can't really have like a set goal or else you're going to be disappointed with yourself if you don't meet those goals.
That's a great point, both in kind of in small terms and in large terms, both. And
Yeah.
You've definitely at 25 years adopted a lot of wisdom from your dad and the people around you. So, but it is kind of an interesting. It's an interesting question to take at such a young age, for sure. Michael, how would you answer that?
Well, it's funny, like I had a really challenging first semester and really first year at the University of Michigan. But in particular, the first semester was really the first time that I had been exposed to like that level of musicianship that I was just exposed to at a consistent basis when I was there. By the way, can you hear me better now? Is this okay? Sound is good? Okay. So that first semester, I felt very, very weak, in particular, like pianistically, but also musically. And I really felt like if you had asked me then what my goal was, it was just to get better as a musician and to get better as a pianist in particular. I really think that it took me 5 years, that 5 years that I was there at U of M, plus every summer, I spent a lot of my summers just in Ann Arbor taking more classes and studying. I was taking lessons with Tad Weed during the summers. And it took me that length of time just to get to a point where I felt like not good yet, but like to zero, kind of. I felt like I was okay. I'm maybe at a level now where I can start to think about what things could transpire. And then the next 5 years after that, for me, I was living in Detroit and I was gigging a lot. And that 5 years for me was really about like building my stamina as a musician, to the point where feel like I feel like this now where I can basically show up and play anywhere in any situation. And it really took that, I guess 10 years of just really intense work to even get to that point where I could just do that. So that's not even to say that like I feel like I can execute all the things musically that I want to execute or that I feel super, super solid in every situation, but I at least feel that like I have the ability to carry myself in a particular way. It really just took me that length of time to get there. You know, of course I was composing a lot when I was in school, and I was making a lot of music with friends and practicing nonstop and jam sessions all the time and doing all those things that you kind of need to do. But I think my goal when I was in college was really just to become a professional musician. And once I became a professional musician by, moving to Detroit and working my way into the scene and et cetera, that's really when I started to develop more of a sense of what kind of music I wanted to make. And it took almost like speed dating. It took a little bit of time of like, dating around in different scenes of musicians and different kinds of music to kind of feel like, okay, I actually feel like I have a sense of what my identity is now as a musician. So I'm 30, how old am I now? I'm 33, gonna be 34. And just over the last few years, I feel like my musical identity has started to emerge just in the last, let's say 3 or 4 years. And of course that's always changing and developing and growing too, but I feel like I have more of an internal compass than I've ever had before. And I hope that continues to grow and continues to change and continues to develop. Like that's part of the joy and that's part of the process, is just like seeing how you change and how you grow and being open to that and letting things in. But when I was younger, my goal was really just to be working. I just wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. I really actually wish that someone had sat me down and forced me to kind of enumerate some goals when I was younger. It was always like this question of like, can you even do this thing? Like, is it even practical to be a musician? So that was kind of in my sphere a lot, from family and that kind of stuff. So I think that just proving to myself that I could do it was enough motivation to kind of get me to a certain level. And it just took me to having put that question to rest to start thinking about a little bit deeper about some deeper musical goals.
Cool. Well, and then you said 35 or 33?
I am 30. I was born in 88, so I'm actually at the age where I'm having a hard time remembering my age. So I'm gonna turn I'm gonna turn 35 this year. My God, that's crazy. Yeah, I'm gonna turn 35 this year.
So 35-year-old Michael, you said one of the things he'd say to college age would just trying to define your goals more, figure out what you want to do.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that that having someone I didn't necessarily have anyone to bounce that off of when I was younger, like when I was in college age. And so developing that kind of deeper level of what your goals could be outside of just like working as a musician, like how do you want to work? What kind of work do you want to do? Who do you want to work with? Where do you want to do that work? What types of situations do you want to find yourself in? Like kind of that second level or third level of stuff that was something that I didn't feel. If you had asked me these questions back then, I definitely wouldn't have had much clarity about that. I just would have said, I just want to work, I just want to be playing a lot. I want to be gigging. I want to be teaching. I want to like be a musician. I want that lifestyle. I want that life. I want to make a living as a musician. That was what was important to me back then. But now that I'm here, I see that it's such a rich world. It's such a varied world. There's so many different things to do. You can't possibly do it all, You kind of have to start to narrow yourself and to make some choices about how you want to live and what kind of work you want to do.
No doubt. Well, James, give me your take on that question.
Let's see. My goal, I remember very specific goals when I was in college. Like I wanted to have a tone on alto. I emulated Russ Miller's tone. And so I said to myself, like, I was 18 years old. I said, I want to have his sound by the time I picked the age 24. It's like, I want to, if I'm not satisfied with my tone on alto when I'm 24, I'm quitting. So, whether that's like what Kasan was saying, like maybe, you might disappoint yourself, so you got to be careful about being so exacting. But, that part of that is just kind of shows like I had role models, and that, that's important to look up people that you look up to and for different things. I wanted a tone on soprano that was like Ralph Moore's. I remember having these conversations with myself, like sitting in the practice room, and it was never formalized. Like I'm going to sit down and write my goals in a journal. I've never kept a diary or a journal or anything like that. But I just remember not being satisfied with how I sounded, and so I picked people to emulate. And so I remember those goals. And I wanted to be able to sit in with, the veterans on the team. Before Rodney Whitaker was Professor Rodney Whitaker, he was just like the awesome bass player in town, right? And we'd go out to New York, and he led a jam session at Alvin's by Wayne State on Cass. I think it's a Carhartt store or something now. And he also, when they reopened the Bluebird, he and his band were playing there. So I would go to Alvin's session, and I just wanted to be able to sit in with that band. It was Rick Rowe and Cassius Richmond, Dwight Adams, and Gerald Cleaver or Kareem Riggins, one of the two. We kind of go back and forth. So I think I sat in one night. I finally had like the nerve to sit in. I mean, I was 18 years old and could not play. Like, I had to read the chord changes to a blues. I just had no business sitting in with them. And so I called St. Thomas, and they just schooled me. I think Kareem just like smacked the drums, and the band just stopped playing like after one chorus of my solo, and just let me hang out to dry. But it was a great, it was tough love lesson, because I didn't know what I was doing. And so, made me go home and practice. And that certainly was a goal. Like, I wanted to be able to play at least one song with a band at that caliber and not embarrass myself. So like I had, that was a goal I certainly had. It inspired me to practice. And then I think, a lot of short-term goals, small ones, just like learn this tune, learn that tune. That's when after a couple of years of being at Wayne, that's when I met you, Scott, and Scott came in as a trombone player. And so that we only knew him as a trombonist. And then I heard somebody playing an Oscar Peterson transcription in the practice room. And so I had to I ran down the hallway, and it was Scott. Like, what? I thought you played trombone, This guy's playing like killing piano. And so, we had small goals together. We had Chuck Bartels was one of our classmates, and he was playing fretless bass, playing out of the Charlie Parker Omni book, way better than any sax player at the time at Wayne. And so that was a goal. Like, I wanted to be able to play Coco with Chuck, because Chuck could play it at tempo. So I couldn't do that yet. So that was like all these small goals, just trying to keep up with the guys that were, setting the pace. Yeah. And then my advice to the folks that are in college now, was that the other part of the question? Or
Well, how have your goals changed now?
oh, how have they changed now? Yeah, they definitely. I do like the idea of small things, just like take care of one small thing a day. I try not to have too lofty of goals. Although I will say this, like when I was in my mid-20s, my goal was to own a home. I started having bigger goals right after I was making a career out of music, and I could make money and pay bills. I realized I could do that. Then my goals were well, I want to be a homeowner. I don't want to drive beat up cars all the time. And you start having more material things, and material things aren't everything, but it's nice to have. As a musician, I realized well, I need time to practice. So I need some kind of income that allows me all the free time to practice and to write and to run the business of being a musician. Like, you have to answer emails, and you have to hustle up gigs, and you have all these other small business type things that you have to take care of. So you can't be worried about the car you're driving, if it's going to run today or not. Like, it has to run. It's part of your business. So you need some of these things. And if you're I know I have some friends on here, if you live in an apartment and you want to practice, you can't do that anytime you want. But if you're in a house, you can, for the most part. I've had the cops call on me a few times, but that's when I was younger and could stay up later. Now I go to bed early, so all the practicing happens in the daytime. But yeah, so there was I'm not trying to be materialistic. I'm just saying there's some logistical things that you need as a musician, and so those became my goals. It's I want that, and I want a better saxophone, and I need a better saxophone case for my better saxophone, and it goes on, and oh well, now you need a bass clarinet, and now you need a piccolo, and all this stuff costs money. So somehow you have to, as a saxophonist, you have to acquire all these doubles, and a soprano, an alto, a tenor, your backup alto, your backup tenor, your flute, your clarinet, piccolo, bass clarinet, goes on and on. So those became my goals. And now my goals are musical goals, and real simple things. I have a friend in Cincinnati, a piano player, Dan Carlsberg, and he and I would talk, and he said, I try to accomplish one musical problem a day, a real small musical problem, one a day. and it might be one measure of an etude that you're working on, or, but not to try to like, I'm going to write a symphony today, or like you never have those large musical goals. You just chip away at small little things, and then that's how you maintain your skill set and how you expand it as well. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
And James, when from the day that I met you, you've always had such a strong sense of self, and and you've been really driven. So knowing you over the years, I mean, that was something, especially when I was really young, that just amazed me, that you are, even at that age, were already like coming up with 4-year plans for things. So it was so different, just living more in the moment and not thinking about the future. So that amazed me then, and it still amazes me now. And I appreciate it more now, because I think a little bit more like that. But yeah, that's just incredible. Everyone, all 3 of you guys went through jazz studies education. We have both some students here that are going through a jazz studies education in a university, students who will be, and students that are probably going to see this later on, that are going to tune in for that exact question. And they want to know what I want to know is, what were the most important tools that you learned in your jazz education in college? Kasan, why don't you start? What did you get out of the experience? What were the most important things?
Well, I think, well, first I would start off with, saying that like networking is very important. That's probably the most important thing that you could have in this sort of circle, this bubble of an industry that we're in, because especially now, because it doesn't matter how well you can play either. I feel like when you show a sort of certain kind of grit, and there's like a pedigree that you may have, and like a desire to play music, if you at least have that, that's like a good start. That's like a great start to making this out of a career, because you can't, like, it's going to be hard to make this out of a career out of music, when you don't have no enthusiasm. It gets really treacherous playing music and having a career. So the fact that some musicians have like a big desire to play, regardless of what their level of playing might be, it's very like heartening to see that people can get far in life just by connecting with different musicians and artists, and even audience members too. And for those who have both the networking prowess and the musicianship, like a good musicianship, then that's like a win-win. People, and you have to be likable too. So that's kind of what I've been told. And just like the business side, I don't really know about the business and the numbers and contracts behind all the music stuff, but like up front, you just have to be a likable person, and you have to be, like I said, like showing desire to play music, and making this out a career. Because again, it's hard. This is not an easy life. Like, we have to have multiple streams of income to kind of keep our heads above water. So if we don't have performance opportunities, then we could kind of say, okay, well, I have publishing, I have teaching, I have, recording, at least, if you want to play, you have at least recording. You also have, you have like, if you have like a CD out, if you have like a record out, you could, sell merchandise with, the CDs and the digital product that you have. And so that's kind of like, what I was told, like, just as like a general idea of like what to do when you're going into this career. But in terms of like the music, I also learned a lot. I've learned, well, I studied, studying with Andrew Bishop at University of Michigan. He just taught me different ways how to practice without wearing yourself out. You shed maybe like one idea from this one artist. Like, so for example, like we were working on this Joe Henderson exercise like for like maybe a couple weeks, and he just showed me ways like how to just like kind of use your own slickness within these like sort of patterns or kind of modulations that Joe Henderson might play, and that's for like any artist too. And also like Bob Hurst, the bass professor there, he talked more about rhythm, and we shedded like some African different African rhythms, odd meters, like maybe like 7/4, or just doing like odd meter time, and so like all those things that I've learned like as a whole, that really helped me with going back to jazz and kind of applying that to my own playing, because everybody's playing is different. So when you take ideas from like, I mean, especially like legends like Bob Hurst, Andrew Bishop, like sometimes you can't take it literally, kind of like have to take it like with your own intuition. Like you have to figure it out on your own. Like you can't just like you're not gonna like fully grasp a concept just by somebody telling you. Like it has to be on your own experience. And so that'll kind of jolt you to the next idea and the next idea, because like it's your way of thinking. So once that concept, you get a grasp of it, then you can move on to the next idea, like with your own, with your own intuition. So that's kind of just like some things. And also like at MSU with Diego Rivera, we kind of like went back to the basics of like, like the importance of scales and the importance of just, kind of applying, scales into your playing. And, because that's kind of what jazz music kind of comes back down to, just scales and just being consistent and firm on those as well. So yeah, I'll pass it to James or Mike.
So just to distill a little bit. So your relationship with the people around you allowed you to network, and you were loose and free enough to take information and just be friendly with people, but also your relationships with your professors and being able to get information from them was one of the most important things you got from school.
Definitely.
Cool. Michael, what about you?
Yeah, well, I guess I want to start by echoing few of the things that Kasan said. The networking thing is huge. And I'm shocked by how many people I went to school with are still the people who are like my core group of collaborators. And at the time, I never really thought of this as networking ever, obviously. It just felt like making music with friends, but it has proven to be a network, absolutely. So I think that if you definitely, make sure that you understand that that is like definitely a benefit of being in a school environment, is building this professional network. There's really nothing quite like it. I'm in the process of booking a tour right now for my duo project, Balance, piano saxophone duo with me and Marcus Elliott on saxophone. And we have 5 shows lined up right now, and every single one of the shows that have actually been lined up and confirmed are through a personal connection of someone who I know in a city. And I've, sent out I don't know, maybe 50 emails to 30 or so venues. And the ones that have gotten back have been the ones that have been introduced to me with like an introduction email from someone who I know, who lives in that city, who is willing to introduce me to the talent buyer or whatever. It's just that I've always known this. This isn't my first time booking a tour. Like I've always known that this is basically how it works, but it's been so funny at this stage of my life, having not done this for a few years, to get back to that and realize this really is how this works. Just knowing people and forming good relationships with people has paid so many dividends over the course of the years. So just like being cool to work with and being cool person and having fun and making music together, that in and of itself can reap blessings that you might not even know of many years down the road. So that's one point I want to echo of Kasan's. The other thing that I really feel like I got out of my jazz studies education is, I guess, 2 separate but related points. One is the time and space to practice, and the second is learning how to practice. So I've never had the opportunity to practice quite as deeply as I did when I was in school, really. That 5 years for me was really about going really deep into the shed and just getting a lot of stuff together. And I've went through periods, especially the 5 years after that. I was getting pretty close. I was practicing a lot. I was gigging a lot more, so I was on the instrument, a lot. But I wasn't quite going into that same type of practice space. And then since then, I mean, I have a kid now. I have a house, like we have responsibilities and stuff. Like my practicing isn't touching the levels that I was at when I was in school. It just isn't, just to be completely honest. So like, there's a different kind of challenge right now, which is like trying to do a lot with a little in the practice kind of situation. But there's no real replacement for at least an extended period of time where you can just go in really hard and you can practice. You have to put in a certain amount of time in order to get to a certain level. So that school for me was kind of like a turbo boost in that I was able to put in a lot of hours in a relatively short amount of time. And I'm really grateful for that because quite honestly, at this stage in my life, I hope I'm not here forever, but there's a certain amount of right now I have to fall back on a certain amount of things because I only have a certain amount of hours in the day. And I have a lot of teaching responsibilities, a lot of family responsibilities. So to have the ability to fall back on a certain amount of stuff, I think that I gained that from having spent so much time in the practice room when I was younger. And I hope that I can one day find that much time again. That's kind of what I'm always pining for. But then the other point is learning how to practice. So it's not just about the hours in the practice room. It's about being efficient with your time. It's about doing it in a way that's healthy, that you make sure that your body and your mind and your spirit are being taken care of when you're practicing. The person who really taught me how to practice was Jerry Allen. She put an incredible premium on technique. So all of her pianists were doing this program that she called the Ritual. Anybody who studied with Jerry knows the Ritual very well. And it's this technique regimen that she made everybody do. And then the other kind of big part of that was transcription. We were always transcribing and we were always composing. And the thing that I learned from her, I think if I had to sum it up, was just like this idea of practice as a reverential act, that you're there in a way. It's like practice as a verb as well as a noun. Like when people talk about their spiritual practice or their yoga practice, like I'm going to go practice now. And it really feels, and it really, I got that sensibility from her And it really feels that way, where a practice, the idea of practicing isn't just like this technical act of coming to the instrument to like learn a new song or something like that. It's this reverential act. It's this like mirror that you look into. It's this like reflective thing. It's this opportunity to get to know yourself better. It's this opportunity to grow, not just as a musician, but as a human being. That was the focus, truly. And that's definitely what I got out of that program as well. So I think of that as my North Star whenever I'm in a practice situation where this isn't just a kind of technocratic thing. It's very much about learning who I am as an individual and learning about the music. I mean, that's the other thing, is that like the work with transcriptions and like the reverence isn't like focused towards yourself. It's focused on the music. And because of that, you get to know yourself better and you get to learn yourself better. You know, like the reverence is for the music, for the masters that came before you, for the process of making the music, for the opportunity to grow as a musician. So yeah, I mean that I got those things out of my experience as a jazz studies major, which were really transformative experiences for me and really transformative paradigms to be thinking about, to be learning about as a young musician.
So again, that's another vote for networking and making relationships. It's fascinating that to this day, years later, that it's powering a tour for you and
It's crazy.
opening up doors.
Yeah.
Um, I see relationships with teachers being really important.
Yeah.
Like everything you guys are saying resounds with me also. I feel the same way. It's the relationship with teachers, the people I've met at school, in case in point, James, what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course, the networking, collaboration, those are like so important. And when you look at the word collaborate, it's co-labor, right? Is where it comes from. So it's like people you work with. And so if like one of my this well, I'll tell you the other thing that I learned, not just music teachers, but any teacher that I had, because of course Wayne State's it's a liberal arts degree involved, so there's a lot of other gen ed things to take and study, and you never know where wisdom is going to come from. You have to be aware, you have to be open for it. And when you're 19 years old, and not always, ears aren't always wide open, but I did have some folks tell me like, hey, when a lot of things that Larry Nazaro is going to tell you won't make any sense, but remember it. And 10 years from now, you'll be playing a job and you'll be, oh, that's what Larry was talking about. And it's very true. That's happened over and over again. But one of the, when I was in school, where was I going with this? The wisdom that the elders will pass on to you. Like I still remember there's things. So like about Larry, one of the things is he told me, and he would say when it was real important, he'd say, write this down. So he said, James, always wear a loose wig. And this was like, I think I was practicing confirmation, like, what are you talking about? Wear a loose wig. But that was like one of his little tidbits. And I remember there one in English class I had was with George Tisch, who I didn't know who George Tisch was at the time. I had no idea, but he was teaching English at Wayne State. And I found out later, but like and he would say, like, don't ever buy what people are selling you. He's like, look at, so one of our writing assignments was to look at we had to review music videos, pick a music video, write a review of it, and then figure out what exactly the company that produced it is trying to sell you, instead of like, because when you're 18 or 19, I wasn't thinking that critically about things at the time. It was just like, it's a song and they make a video. I wasn't, thinking about all the propaganda or whatever subtleties that, ideas that people are trying to push on you. But I remember that class vividly. I remember Rick Ratner's class, The Business of Music. Yeah, The Business of Music. And he said, follow the money, and everything. If you want to figure out what a contract is, follow the money. And so little things like that, just bits of advice that have come from people that are much more experienced and older than me at the time. And I probably missed out on a lot too, because I wasn't always focused or ready to receive that. But some real practical things for sure, things that have helped me out. What school, I'm trying to think of other things besides networking and lessons from teachers musically. A lot of it too is like, I've got a good story about Professor Teeny, seeing as he's here. Hopefully I won't embarrass him, because it was a memorable day. He was the dean at the time of the music school, and he liked to float around classrooms, right, and check in on classrooms, see what was happening. And I don't know if it was our class or not, but maybe you came from a class. I think it was a sites. We were in ear training, and it was sad. I mean, they were like, yeah, because it's 8 a.m., right? An 8 a.m. class, like Kasan was talking about. You're tired, and it's a site. I think it was ear training 4, so you're doing like atonal, trying to read all the sites, sing atonal excerpts, and everybody's like slouched and like mumbling as they sing. And Professor Teeny came in, and he embarrassed us. He read us the riot act. I mean, how like lethargic we all were. No one was sitting up straight. And Dennis has a very high range, right? Like, I don't know if you still have that range, but you just you belted out the stuff we were trying to sing so loud and with such like pure pitch. And that's what it wasn't like what you were trying to put us in our place or inspire us or like chastise us for being lethargic. It really, what was inspiring was just the sound of your voice and how pure the pitch was. And I was like, I want to play like that. Like, I want my saxophone to sound like that. So yeah, like there's always moments. When you're in music school, there's going to be moments like that. And then other things that don't mean anything to you, whatever. But you're in that environment where there's inspiration always about to happen. So that would be my advice to folks that are in school now or contemplating going to music school is, be aware of your surroundings and always look for that inspiration. I did write down everything that I worked on in my lessons, because I knew I couldn't practice it all. There was too much information. So I had a notebook of all the things that I was going to practice when I left school. And I practiced out of that book for probably 11 years. Yeah.
Man, that was pretty cool. I'm just curious to throw it back at Michael or Kasan. Did either of you have some kind of magical moment or moment of clarity that you remember that you want to bring up? Kasan, anything come to mind?
I mean, just how much my dad like whooped me. I'm like, no joke, like every time, like it wouldn't even be about like something that I did bad. Like it would just be about something like about the music. It was just like I mean, he wasn't like, because he knew like I could have done better, I could play better, you know, that like I'm better than what I'm currently playing at the time. And, you know, like it makes you not okay. I'm gonna change it. He didn't whip me like every time, but it was just like he was, you know, he got like, you know, it was like a feeling of like being enforced, you know, like it was like, because you don't, like you said, like you don't feel like, you know, doing some of the stuff that you practice half the time anyway. Like it might be difficult for you. You might just like want to quit just all in all. But like if you don't have something or someone to enforce you and to be like, hey, like, okay, reinforcement, like you have to have some like type of reinforcement to be like, okay, well, let me just do this because I know I want to be successful. You know, I'm working at this for a reason, you know. So it's like if you don't have something to enforce you, be like, okay, like let's just do it. You know, we have to do it. Like this is music. Like, you know, you're not gonna. It's not gonna get done for you. You know, so it's like everybody every time when like somebody has told me that, oh, like you're not playing something, or like you're not playing yet. You're not playing, like you're not playing it right. It's like it kind of like it's like kind of like an attack. It's kind of like a personal sort of like enlightenment of yourself. It's like, oh well, like I know I'm not playing this right, so like I have to change. If somebody else is telling me that like I'm not sounding good, then like it's like a, oh well, at least for me, like that's like a, oh well, you know, then now I have to like figure it out. You know, now I have to like sort of reset. Like I have to like go back and like relearn this, which is a good thing. Like, you know, I think that like young people nowadays are afraid to have criticism. Me, like just growing up with my dad, like there was always criticism, whether you do good or bad. Like it was always like a, you know, like a push forward because like people know that you could do better. And so if you want to get better as well, you know, you have to be real with yourself. And, you know, so every time there's like an instance where you get called out, like really think about it and like be like, okay, well, is this person really personally attacking me for my personality or just who I am, or is he telling me to like be better because that's what I want to do. I want to get better. So when you next time somebody calls you out, I'm talking to students, like next time somebody calls you out for how bad you sound, like they're actually giving you a compliment. They're actually telling you, hey, I care. Like I care about you. Like I know you can sound good. I could hear a little bit, but right now you're playing sad. Take that as a good thing. Like if that were to happen to you, because there is definitely times where like I've gotten called out for not playing. Like in New York, like, you know, you'll get like your comments here and there, like, hey, like you're not playing jack, you know, like sometimes that's good because you're like, it's like a realization, like, oh well, you know, somebody's telling me that I'm not sounding good, so I know I have to like get to a place where I'm not in that position anymore. You know, that's just me. Not everybody works like that. Not everybody's open to criticism, but it's honestly at the end of the day like a really good thing for you because not everybody's gonna tell you. Not everybody cares enough to tell you. So
True enough.
mhm.
Michael, any moments of magic clarity that happened?
It's funny
in
that,
college?
yeah, just hearing Kasan talk about his dad, like, obviously I didn't have as many experiences like that as you did, but I definitely had a few myself. Like there was this one time in high school where I was playing in Civic and he kicked me off the piano bench and sat down and started comping. And just and like was real intense about it too, like really kicked me off the piano bench and like was looking at me like as he was comping, like this, you know. And yeah, he wasn't like a great pianist, but like the rhythmic sensibility, of course, was like like not perfect isn't even the word to describe it. It was like exactly what it should have been. And who knows what kind of junk I was playing. And I learned way more. I learned 90% of what I know about comping from that, like, couple minutes of interaction right there. I just, like that was exactly what Kasan said. Like it's a compliment to be treated in that way, because that means that the person believes that you're good enough to be able to be improved, right? But it's funny because the experience that I had studying with Jerry Allen wasn't different but similar. She was like kind of classic, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed kind of vibes. Like if you walked into her office and you were unprepared or not ready to perform at your highest level, she would never like really blow up at you. But you could tell that something was amiss. And so she was definitely someone who you didn't want to approach in that way. Our time with her was like relatively limited. She was there like once every other week. And we would have these like long lessons, like 2 hours. And once or at least once, maybe more than once, but at least once that I can remember, she sent me out of her office like before our time was up. And it was I think probably relatively early on in my time there, and also because I just wasn't prepared enough to like merit her attention for that full period of time. So I took that as a lesson to always be more prepared than I thought I needed to be, and to be ready to go. And definitely learned that lesson there, because that was valuable, really, really valuable time for me. And I wanted to make sure I had the, like the taking the most advantage of it. So, the tough love thing is super, super good and super important, but also I would also be remiss to not point out that some of the best educators, and someone including somebody like Jerry Allen, were very vociferous and vocal in voicing their support as well. And so I also think that that's important as an educator. Like I try and balance those things personally. I try and balance like being strict and rigorous, with also being loving and supportive, and making sure that my students are understanding that. So for any young students who are out there, listening or whatever, just you know try and weigh those things as well. And like you ultimately have to be a judge of your teachers as much as your teachers are a judge of you as well. So keep that in mind too.
Nice. I feel like you guys have kind of beat me to my next question, because you're already kind of talking about this a little bit. But if you wouldn't mind expanding on it, maybe we'll go the opposite way around this time. Start with James. Um, what mistakes did you make, or mistake did you make in your formative years, that you have since learned from?
Mistake?
Yeah, mistake. Yeah, that one mistake.
Yeah, I know. I do remember I missed an accidental. The year was 2004. No, let's see. Mistake I made in my formative years. Well, I know I was very so I was told this by Matt Michaels, always say yes. And I practiced that for a really long time. But I got to a point where I was thinking like, oh well, I want to play jazz music and only jazz. I'm only concerned about playing jazz. And so I wouldn't say yes to some things because I thought they were like, it was music that I wasn't interested in. If I like playing a top 40 job, I wouldn't do it because, if it didn't swing, I didn't want to do it. So I think that was a mistake because it took me some more time later to realize like, oh, like well, one, there's like musical value in what top 40 music does. Like, it's not just, you can't be a jazz snob about it. There's validity in it, musically, and just how people react to it. And it actually informed once I embraced it, it kind of informed how I went about creating my own quintet then, because I wanted musicians that were very familiar with playing in top 40 bands, because their level of preparation is different than most jazz musicians. And when guys that can cross over have a different approach to playing straight ahead, and the music that I was writing at the time needed that. So I learned from that mistake for sure. But I would say that was probably my biggest one, because then, of course, I was young and foolish, and I'm telling people like, oh, I don't want to play those jobs. Well, then they're not going to call you for that $400 gig on Saturday night to play that job. And so like, because you told them you don't want to do it, so ahead of time. So like, I would say, like, yeah, don't go around telling people what jobs you don't want to play, and reiterate Matt Michael's advice, and it's like, never say no, always say yes, and figure it out, later. So yeah, that would.
Nice. Kasan, how about you? It hasn't been too long since you've been in school, but what's something you've learned from those formative years, from a mistake or mistakes you made?
Mistakes. I guess like not going. Okay, well, I went out to a lot of jam sessions and shows of my friends, but I feel like I didn't do that enough. I feel like I kind of went there for the hang, you know what I mean? Like more for the hang and not for more the support of the musician. And like just being there, and well, being there is good. You support your friends at their gigs, and you buy maybe a drink or some food, and you're supporting the um the establishment. But in terms of like, I think I should have went out to more of shows where people would come out from New York and from LA, and out of the country, and to for them to be there, and for me to be from Detroit. I felt like I should have been more I guess in touch with those guys, because when they come to town, like that's only like, it's only a limited time. They maybe come once or twice a year, um, to our area, and so I feel like doing that as much as you can is very important, because at some point, you want to branch out to other scenes in different cities, whether you stay here or not. It's it's always good to have as many connections as you can. Just like Michael, he's setting up this tour, so you have something, you have like a weekly gig here or something, and then once you gain traction, you want to go out to other cities, and so those acts that come from out of state and out of the country into Detroit, if you don't make those connections with them, and if you're in their city at some point on a tour, then you would want them to do the same, or you would just want them to remember, like, hey, I met you in Detroit, blah blah blah. I I'm here for a gig. Let's collaborate, or you know let's go for a drink or dinner. Like, just kind of getting network networking with professional musicians already. Like, we kind of talked about that already, but just trying to I'm so sorry. Just trying to get acquainted with as many professionals as possible. I think I could have done more than that, more of that in college. So yeah, I mean, like, college is, such a distraction in a way. You could get, there's so much out there in the world. Like, you're 18, 19, 20 years old, and you are just absorbing everything at once. But I think, you know, if you want to be the best and most successful musician you can be, you know, um, just get out as much as you can. I think I see Jerron Perry in this group, and like literally for like a year or two before he went to MSU, I couldn't go anywhere in Detroit without seeing him there, like dressed up nice, in a suit always, like like that counts. Every encounter of that type of sort of persona, like if you walk into a club like that, that matters to people. They'll remember you just by seeing that you're well dressed, you're well put together, you want to play and you can play. And that's like the perfect package of like, getting, you know, um, further into the networking bubble of this music bubble, I guess. Yeah.
Cool. Michael, how about you?
Yeah, like mistakes that we made when we were younger, and
Yeah.
what, yeah, how to correct them. Well, it's funny. When I turned 30, I actually made a promise to myself that I was going to try to not repeat the mistakes of my 20s. So I I felt like I had a lot of victories in my 20s and a lot of defeats in my 20s, and tried to be thoughtful about that, and tried been trying to not try to take the victories with me into the next phase and leave and learn the lessons of the defeats. So one kind of pitfall that I guess I found myself in, not necessarily in school, but really in that period directly after school for me, is because I was in a mode of always saying yes, 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 yes. I had similar advice as James, and I was really saying yes to a lot, to everything. I found my time and energy and labor being taken advantage of by people who either weren't sensitive to how much work goes into being a musician, or who maybe were willfully taking advantage of me. So not getting paid enough and performing lots and lots and lots of unpaid labor for various kind of work situations that I'd found myself in. So because of that, I kind of developed this idea of, for me, there are seasons to things. Like I have seasons of yes and seasons of no. Developing my ability to say no has been one of the most important things that I've been able to develop over the last 5 to 10 years. I'm very comfortable with saying no to something if I don't feel like it's going to serve me at this point in my life. That being said, like I understand why the advice of always say yes is out there, because it was massively beneficial to me as well. Like I think that there's a season for that. There's a season for always saying yes, and a lot of times that's when you're really young, and when you need to meet a lot of people, and when you have to, grow your network and grow your opportunities and grow your stamina and make money and all of these things that like you need to do when you're young. So it's not that I say like, don't say yes to everything, or, only say no or whatever. But for me, what it's really about now is just being thoughtful about everything. Like if I'm going to say yes to something, I have to have a reason for it. If I'm going to say no to something, I have to have a reason for it as well. Like I have to be thoughtful about it, and developing a kind of sense of um, just like that kind of interpersonal skill of understanding if somebody feels like someone who's trying to take advantage of me, versus if they feel like someone who actually wants to be collaborative and wants to work together, and who's actually seeing me for who I am. I'm interested in meeting people in a kind of mutual respect type of way these days. So that's another skill that I feel like I've developed over the years, and that I'm continuing to develop, that I didn't necessarily have when I was younger. I didn't necessarily have the ability to do that internal filtering of like, this person is a beneficial person, this person maybe not so much, even though they're both offering me a gig, which is the one that I want to take and which is the one that maybe I should avoid, you know? I think that comes with time and is nothing that like truly like wrecked me or anything like that, but it was something that I felt like I needed to address, was that. Some other mistakes that I made when I was younger was like I got really focused on like booking gigs. Like I wanted to have lots of gigs and like playing lots of places and doing lots of things. And that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. And when I'm saying that is I'm talking about booking gigs like with my groups and like with like under my name, like being a leader, doing stuff. But I didn't necessarily know at the time how much work goes into really doing a gig properly. So promoting a gig, making sure that you're corresponding with the venue, making sure that you're sending press photos and bios, maybe paying for some advertising, contacting press, if you're putting out a record, putting it in front of people to review, that kind of thing, like there's just so much work that goes into that. And like, like a real, like one big failure of mine was like, I booked a big tour for my trio. We went out to the East Coast and we had some awesome shows. Like we had, I don't know, 50 people at this awesome club in Montreal. We had 50 people in New York. It was like, we had some really, really good shows. But then we had like 4 people in Baltimore. And so I didn't know anybody in Baltimore. I didn't have any real reason to be there in the first place. So I had to, that was a real lesson for me, was like, okay, cool, you did the thing. There was some mixed success, but what can you learn from these failures here? What can you learn from that so that you're not in that kind of situation where you're feeling like, well, like what was the point of this in the first place, So when I think back on my 20s and I think back on like my earliest stage of my career, I think that I was just really interested in doing lots of things and I didn't necessarily give every single thing a lot of thought. I want to just do a lot of stuff. And now that I'm at this like, slightly more mature age where I'm like, trying to take myself to the next phase of my career, I'm endeavoring to be more thoughtful about everything that I do. And I think that that's something that a young musician can do too. But it takes a little bit of planning and it takes some courage and it takes the ability to know yourself.
Cool. Very, really thoughtful answers. Thank you, all 3 of you guys, for those. Um, so all of I think everyone can gather from everything you've said so far and your reputations and and just your demeanor that you're all 3 of you are driven musicians and um, no matter where you are, you have a plan. Um, James, where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
Um, I mean, to be honest, I don't really think that far out. I mean, I'm trying to keep my body healthy. That's where I'm at.
Okay.
Um, so, I'm hoping that I can physically do all the same things that I'm doing now. I play a lot of tennis and I run and work out. I try to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And so musically, you know I think it's probably there's a variety of ages on this, attending this webinar. Everybody probably has a different a different goal. I think it just depends on where you're at. Like when I was in my 30s, if I thought 10 years from now, I would have a different answer than I did in my 20s, and different answer than probably what I would have now that I'm in my late 40s. So, um, I hope that I'm still curious and enthused and excited about music. And um, I've never, so like I was saying earlier about role models, I have negative role models in my life too. No, of course, no one that I see here, but I'll look at some older musicians and think like, I do not want to be like him or her when I'm older. So, and that's generally like the disgruntled, jaded, bitter musician. That like or the guy that musicians that like eat over the buffet line, instead of taking a plate and putting the food on, different things. I see bad examples and I remember those bad examples too. So I try not to be one of those. So musically, yeah, the guys that, if somebody kind of plateaus and isn't, to me, a plateau is just and it happens at all stages, but I see that as just a lack of inspiration. So possibly a lack of discipline. So those are the things that I'm looking out for, those tiny little, all these things start small to not, it's never big. So I'm looking out in my life, like for the next 10 years, I'm just trying to iron out the wrinkles and make sure there's no small things that balloon into something worse later. So, healthy habits, both physically and mentally and spiritually and musically, all matter, so I'm just trying to keep everything on par with like where my ideals are. I try to line up my life so my actions are a result of what I hold as an ideal. So kind of just a lot of, house cleaning, so to speak. Yeah, so I don't know, like that's where I'm at, trying not to get too far ahead of myself. It never was one of my goals to be like, oh, I want to be in this city or that city, or I want to be there. Like my goals have always been more inward. And so like if I'm not playing music, I'm still going to be expressing James Hughes, but just in a different way. Like we all discovered that through the pandemic. And I know a lot of people, it was a struggle to not play, but for me, I just figured like right away, like, oh, well, I'll express myself in a different way than using music. So that was the best bit of advice, if I can just riff a little bit, that I got from my father. And I was nervous that maybe he wouldn't think a life in music would be a good career choice. And he doesn't give a lot of advice. He's a quiet man. And but what he did tell me was, he's like, well, everything you do, you invest in yourself. And so, he didn't care what business I was in, because he knew that I focus on the self-discipline, and I think inwardly, and that you can excel at, whatever you decide that you want to pursue. So I see music as just an extension of that. So how are we doing? I'll
Yep.
pass my time over to Michael or Kasan.
Yeah, Kasan, what do you have to say? What's 10 years from now? Where do you see yourself?
Man, well, like James said, like, I mean, I think just being the best person you can inwardly will help you do whatever. In 10 years, I hope the same. Like, I hope I can. I hope I'm still. I still hope I have the energy of like a 20-year-old. When I'm what, 35. Yeah, when I'm 35. Like, I hope I could, be. I hope I'd have a family by then. Like wife and kids, blah blah blah. But at some point, just trying to, if musically, if I'm going for something, if I have like my own original music, trying to just portray that in the best way and the most vulnerable way possible, so that I could have like a real connection with my audience and like other musicians, and just start like creating a good circle for yourself, creating a good life for yourself. At some point, students go through like, music students go through like a bunch of mental things like throughout like their early lives. They kind of ponder like the life's biggest questions, because you know, like I said from before, like music is hard and making a career out of this is hard. So once you really know like what you want your music to sound like, you know, by the time you're 35 years old, you know, you want to create like a good life for yourself, you know, having your friends make tours for you, have, you know, having your friends like help you with, you know, whatever it is in your career musically. Um, and so like, yeah, so like Mike Malice, like he's like a perfect example. Like that's kind of like your model, I guess, picture of what you want yourself to look like at the age of 35 in a music career in the city of Detroit, like in the city of everywhere, anywhere, you know? Um, so I feel like for people 10 years from now, for students 10 years from now, they're going to be maybe my age, like 25, you know, early 20s, 25, you know, hopefully, you know, most students would figure out what they really want to do in life at this point and kind of just start nurturing the first seeds of their career. Um, and they don't necessarily have to know what exactly.
Uh-oh. He'll join us in a second. I thought that was pretty wise. Um, you know that yeah, students don't have to know exactly where they're going, but to have a vision, I think, is important for all of us to not only look in front of our face, but to look to the horizon a little bit, and knowing that even though the ship is not going to sail right that way, it's a crooked, sometimes a crooked path. If we're finding, if we're finding that kind of, oh cool, here's Kasan. I'm gonna let him finish that.
You guys lost me, sorry.
It's all good.
Okay.
How are you gonna finish that up?
So basically, yeah, so you know, just you know, you didn't, you know, students don't have to know what their path is going to necessarily look like, but you know, at least, you know, by my age, you know what you want to do, and you know, just yeah, like I said, like start nurturing like the first like big steps of like your career, and that might require taking small steps, you know, um, taking, you know, having like a weekly gig, um, you know, like on weekends, finding like a couple weekly gigs, you know, put out an album, you know, you know, make a tour for yourself, you know, start using your connections in other cities. You know, it's all like you know, that's all kind of encompassed into one. So yeah, just, you know, just like if you really love this music, love it, and, you know, try to get as far as you can and with what you have, you know. That's a good start.
Nice. Michael, what about you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, both James and Kasan have already made some really, really great points. Uh, as I'm getting older, I am starting to realize that the necessity of taking my health really seriously. So what James said really resonated with me there. And then what Kasan said really resonated with me as well, like the idea that you don't necessarily need to know exactly what's next. I'm somebody who makes a lot of like goals for very specific projects. Like I want to write this piece for this ensemble. I want to get this band off the ground. I want to book this tour. I want to put on this record. And I, you know, make lists and goals and try and keep myself to standards and that kind of thing. But it's funny that every time I kind of set my mind to a project, the end result ends up being just a little to the side of what I thought it was going to be. And I think that that's good and productive and useful. It's the difference between like what you think something could be and like the reality, like when you actually put an idea into motion in the world, like the forces of the world are just going to like change that idea in some way. And I think that you have to be open to that to be in this type of work. Like it's not all it's rarely is it ever linear. It is this kind of circuitous thing, the work that you have to do to be in this world. So you have to have a certain amount of open-mindedness and open-endedness about where things are going to go. So with that in mind, I do have like some very specific goals for where I want to be 10 years from now, the kind of music I want to be making, the type of life I want to be living. But I think if I were to boil it down to something overarching, what I really want to be in 10 years is creative, more creative than I am now. And creativity is a primary tenet of my life, but I want to be even more creative than I am now. The reason why I say that is because for me, I'm somebody who has to be I have to be in good order to be creative. I don't thrive in chaos. I don't thrive in the situation in precarious situations. I have to have my basics taken care of. I have to have a roof over my head and enough money, and I have to be living a decent life to begin to start thinking creatively. So if I'm in a place where I'm thinking creatively, that means that I'm where I need to be personally as well, So I hope that 10 years from now, I'm in a creative state of mind personally.
Cool. Very, very nice, Michael. All right, we have some um, awesome people here. I recognize some of you. Some people are new to me, but I'm sure we have some questions for our three artists. So I'd like to take some time here to answer any of those questions. Is there someone who would like to go first? Miles, go ahead. You're muted. You're muted, Miles.
I'm currently taking jazz band at Schoolcraft College. My jazz professor is Ricardo Silva. Do any of you guys know him?
Yes.
Yeah, I know Ricardo.
How?
Well, I think when he first moved to town, he reached out to me somewhere, came to one of my gigs and introduced himself. Yeah, I mean, we haven't worked together in a band, but so we've seen each other of course, at Schoolcraft College. How do you like it there?
It's good.
What do you play, Miles?
One of the other guys on here plays it also.
What instrument do you play?
Trombone.
All right. Cool. Do you have any other questions for our artist?
That was it.
Cool. Well, thank you. Is there another question? We could take them in the chat, or Jeff Dunn. Go ahead.
I had the golden opportunity to have pianist Bill Cunliffe, in my car for a little tour that we were doing in the Midwest. He's in the back seat and he's doing arrangements. He's on the phone with agents. He's setting up a lesson plan for his classes, and he's got his hands into 100 different things musically. Is that your experience? I keep hearing that you have to have multiple disciplines within the music realm.
Yeah, I would say unequivocally yes. Yeah. You need a diverse skill set, and then where you can't do something, you need to reach out for help, because we're not all accountants, we're not all lawyers, and that stuff we're not booking agents, we're not tour managers, like that. None of that stuff is, I don't think, taught for anybody. But we run a small business, and so practicing and all the music stuff aside, I think Kasan said it early on, like sometimes playing is like the last thing, the last part of the equation, even though you think that music is the first part of the equation. But a lot of times, the saying is like, if you take care of the music, music will take care of you. That's true to an extent. all these other things. If that was true, then Bill wouldn't be, doing all this stuff in the back seat of your car like at every spare minute of his life. Yeah, so that's like, I'm sure the larger stage you're on, the more responsibilities you have, and not everybody can afford to have a tour manager or that take care of a lot of those small things. Guys like us, it's like, yeah, we're taking care of all those details all the time. So yeah.
James, and I'm gonna ask both we might have lost Kasan again. But James and Michael, could you both tell us like what some of those things you guys what it is you do? What are some of those things?
Stresses me out just thinking about it, but yeah, there's so much. James, do you want to go first?
Sure. So like I'll just give an example. Say when you record an album, and then the idea is like, oh, we'll have a record, and then it will be out. Now our name will be out there, and like we have product. Well, that doesn't work like that. So, the steps of booking the studio, it might not line up. It might not be the studio you want. And then if it is a studio you want, obviously, so you got to like kind of audition studios in a way, and then you got to set all the scheduling. So you're scheduling musicians, you're arranging all that stuff, and then say when you're done, now you can't just release the album. You need to hire a publicist. You're not going to do the publicity on your own. If you think you are, you're crazy. Like, so you can't hire just somebody to do all the publicity for you, and it has to be timed. So you need a radio publicist, and you need a print publicist, because those people they don't have the same connections, so they don't do all the same things. And so then now you have to figure out who you're going to hire to do that, and then how long. Like, you have to stagger it because print takes longer than radio. So there's all this coordinating going on, and that's like in the I never realized that stuff until I got involved in it. And it's like, oh, and so all these things just kind of pile up. And then, it's you need a photo that looks like this, and you need a bio, and you need to make a one sheet, and then you have to, that's just thinking all the different things you need to be doing when you record an album, if you want it to go somewhere, or if you have aspirations for it, instead of just documenting it. But like, if you want your own record, and that's doing it, of course, that's doing it on my own. If you get with a record label nowadays, it's not that different. It's not that much different. They're not taking care of a whole lot for you anyways. So it's just all the secretarial work of that is so much more deep than thinking about, oh, I want to record this song, and I want to take a killing solo on this song, or whatever. It's so much more involved with it. A lot of communication and planning. Yeah.
Michael, do you have something you want to add to that?
I mean, yeah, James covered a lot of stuff there, but on a day-to-day basis, like not even thinking about like a project-based model where like the project itself has like so many different things that you have to account for. I feel like I spend a lot of time doing accounting work. I spend a lot of time communicating with people, and I spend a lot of time doing a lot of research for either current or future opportunities. So I also run a piano. I mean, I have a 40 student piano studio, so that takes up that's a lot of well, it's not just piano, but a 40 student private teaching studio. So I'm doing a lot of work communicating with students and parents, and sending invoices and scheduling and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of accounting related to that, and then communicating with venues and advancing shows and applying for grants and visioning new projects. And I easily, days will get eaten up by just doing pure admin work before I have to start teaching. And so I have to really make a concerted effort to carve out time to practice, or carve out days where this is my admin day, and then the next 3 or 4 days I can actually practice, is how things tend to work for me. So that I actually do have time to do that. And I also have to just let things go and not be on top of every single thing, because you do have to find time for the music still. So yep, it's definitely a challenge balancing everything. All of us are overworked and we need more administrative support. Without question.
Absolutely. Jacob, I noticed you have a question. You've had your hand up for a while. What?
Yeah. Wait, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
All right. So I just wanted to ask, so I've just started out like getting gigs and stuff, and so I wanted to know how to like get or maintain like a recurring gig, like a weekly gig or a monthly gig or something like that.
Someone want to answer that?
James, you should answer that one.
All right. Well, like, yeah, once you get a gig, you want to keep it. That's the first thing. So it's good to be hired, but then you want to keep getting hired. So make sure you're doing all the right things. What I mean by that is like not doing the foolish things and walking out on your tab or being rude to the wait staff or to the bartenders, because they all talk, and if they don't like you, you won't be back. So you need to do right by the folks that work there, because you're a part of their team. And of course, like, wearing the right clothes and showing up on time, should be obvious, but the musicians aren't always there, but like, dress appropriately, be on time, and don't end early and don't play too late either. Like the wait staff doesn't appreciate if you play 20 minutes past the end time, where musicians think you're giving them extra. It's like you're just creating more headaches for the wait staff. So some of those things don't. So that's how to keep a gig. And of course, it's nice if you have a draw. So if people are showing up to your job, that's going to help you, so that, get your friends and family out for that first job. When you do get hired, make sure that there's a lot of people out there and not just sitting there drinking waters and taking up tables, but like, actually spending money at the club. That usually helps. And then, any of the like a weekly gig, those are always really nice, and they're coveted, not necessarily easy to get. I don't think. You don't just cold call a place and get it. You usually have to establish some kind of relationship, or somebody has to vouch for you. And yeah, I would say, if a lot of times there's like one of the strategies I see that I don't know how well it works, but it's kind of like going in and trying to take someone's weekly gig, because they see like, oh, this place has, jazz every Thursday night, and there's somebody that plays there every Thursday night. So your mentality is like, oh, I could do that. I don't think that's a great strategy, because you're going to be like kind of confrontational with musicians, and those musicians are your friends. They're not your competition. They're going to help you in the future. I wouldn't be going after something that already exists. Like, create something in a new place. Try to find a place that's similar. The way these businesses often run are like, if like I played an Irish bar jazz brunch for years, because we had a jazz brunch at an Irish bar. The place across the street wanted to have a jazz brunch. It's like, that's how they think. And so, like, man, if somebody could go over there, they realize like it's not out of the question that this place would want something very similar, even though it's right across the street. That's kind of how some of these businesses operate. But that would be my suggestion, is like, try to create new venues. Even that we call them jazz tolerant clubs. You know, they'll have jazz once a week. That's fine. Those are great places. And then, you know, try to create a new spot.
Another question I have for you guys is, do you guys know the Aretha's Jazz Cafe in Detroit?
Yeah, Scott runs a jam session there,
Mhm.
and all ages and abilities are welcome.
Back in high school, I back in high school, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. Back in high school, I had a I had something to do with jazz band there from my high school.
Cool.
Oh,
And then after we played, I believe it was you guys that came on.
What high school did you go to?
Plymouth High School.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mr. Bellamy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. Just so we can get through questions here, Marcel, what's something that you said? What is something you wish you would have given more attention to back in high school? Does someone want to answer that? Go for it.
Myself, like looking back now, like hearing recordings of myself and videos, you know, I could see why I didn't like my playing, and I can see why I didn't want to hear myself. I still don't want to hear myself today, but I feel like recording yourself is probably the best way of like knowing where you are in terms of how you sound and where you want to get to. And I, you know, most people are very self-conscious about themselves and how they sound. Um, Especially with me, like when I was in high school, I did not like enjoy like hearing myself back like right after a concert. But and like a lot of my friends do that. They like play a show and then they record it and then they listen to it like as soon as they get home. And like I just didn't understand why. I thought it was kind of like an ego thing, but now I realize that like people lot of musicians do that because they like have like a certain they want to get somewhere and they know that like the sound that they want doesn't it's not there yet and they want to change it or they want to make adjustments to it. So I feel like that is a big thing. um Something, what was the question? What was the,
It
the
was
question?
what is something you wish you would have given more attention to back in high school?
Oh yeah. That, and like I said before, like just going out to more venues, checking out more people, more shows. Yeah, checking out your friends' shows too is a good do that as much as you can because they'll support you too. They'll return that favor. Yeah, that's kind of what I have.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Um,
Wish I would have followed my instincts. I wanted to go to like a Jamie Apersall camp or something, and I never did. And I was like, why didn't I do that? Because one, the material is great, and there's like so many good players that teach there, and then there's you'll meet other people from other parts of the country, and like that's a regret. I wish I would have listened to myself more in those regards.
Gary Herzensteel has a question. Hey, Gary, is there any reasonable money to be made on the internet? What is the return on investment for making an album? And is it worth making your own album anymore, especially for non-national artists? Someone like to answer that?
You can take that one.
Cool.
I really like making albums, and I think that it is not only worth it, but I kind of feel like it's essential, to be honest, to be making records, to find a way to be making records. Sort of like one of your only opportunities to really present yourself in a way that feels that you have complete control over. In a lot of different situations, you are going to be trying to fit yourself into, whether it's a venue or a series or whatever. But an album, you can really control the situation, especially the way things are now, where people are basically making albums by themselves. Um, it's not exactly an easy thing to do, but it does get easier over time. Um, and uh, and then the other thing too, especially for non-national artists, I mean, I think that we get crowded out by national artists a lot, and the only one of the only places where it's even a semi-level playing field. It's really not a level playing field, but one of the places where you can kind of, get a little bit of a boost is in the kind of album space, right? Because if your album is really good and people are digging it, then it doesn't really matter where you're from. So I think that making albums is even more important for us than it is for people who are on a more national profile. In terms of the return on investment and is there money to be made on the internet? I mean, obviously, like, the state of the record industry, let's put it that way, is really, really terrible for artists right now. So there's no sugarcoating that. I recently got like a $10 deposit from CD Baby. I was like, what's this from? And it turns out it was like several years worth of Spotify streams that like had added up to that amount of money. So like, okay, that's pretty dire. No, but I have put out a bunch of records and I've never lost money on a record. There's it's something you have to figure out how to fund. Like I've fronted the money for every every project that I've been involved with. But at this point, I know how to make cheap records. I know how to make expensive records. I know how to make collaborative records. I know how to make records where I self-release. I know how to make records where I'm working with a label. I know, like there's a lot of different ways that you can make records. And, I've made a bunch of records a bunch of different ways and I love it. I love all of them. If I consider what they all are and what they mean and what they show, then yeah, I love each one of them. So, you know, you can definitely make it work. A part of like the benefit of having records is doubling or whatever your income for gigs. Like if you got a record that you can sell, suddenly a gig that the money is kind of meh can actually turn into something that's relatively lucrative because people will buy your records at the shows. So if you consider all of that, like definitely like there's an opportunity for a return on investment, not to mention that it just like presents you as more professional to people who are interested in presenting music venues and series and festivals and that kind of thing. If you have records out, then people are more likely to take you seriously, so you might get more opportunities from that. That's a kind of immeasurable benefit, I think, but definitely a benefit as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of records. I buy records, I listen to records, I make records. Like, I think that that's an area that we should be working in, but it's hard because you have to have a capital investment up front. You have to have some money to front for studio and for musicians and for mixing and stuff. And you are kind of like putting your faith that ultimately you're going to make your money back. But my experience has been that typically ends up working out one way or another. It just might take some time. So it's worth the planning and the struggle. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Michael. We're kind of winding down here, so I would like to pose a question to all three of the artists really quickly. And if you could address the people who, especially the artists here who are looking for wisdom, could each of you share a bit of wisdom that you've gained over your time of playing, like one bit of wisdom with our watchers and listeners? Kasan?
Wisdom that I've learned in the past. How long did you say?
We're at whenever, and wherever.
Well, for the music aspect, you know, aside from playing your own music, when you play other people's music, um, try to know the story of every song that you play. Try to learn if there's lyrics to it. Trying to, you know, look up the lyrics and kind of, you know, there's always a story with songs, and um, I learned, I was on the road with Wynton Marsalis this past month, and that was honestly like the biggest and best musical experience I've had. I've learned so much about my playing and myself in the music. And the one thing I'm going to say is playing Duke Ellington's music, and there's a song called Le Sucre Velour. There's only one published pressing of the sheet music ever. There's one like piece of paper that exists in the world. And it's Duke's original handwriting. He wrote it for the Queen of England. And it's, I think it's maybe 32 bars of a ballad, and it's only the saxophones. And the way that the original recording is played, there's just a specific feeling that comes with that. There's a certain emotion with that song. And so we played that song every day, every concert of this tour. I think it was like 16 city tour. And that was like the saxophone section's like feature. And that was the hardest. It was literally like that fast. And it was the hard, like along with all the songs that we were playing, like all these fast, like 16th notes, just hard rhythms, like that ballad was the hardest thing to play because the emotion that it took, the energy that it takes to play that song with like very like, it's very legato, like vibrato, long phrases. You can't just play what's on the note. You can't just play the notes that are on the paper. You have to play the emotion and the energy that that the song was designed for. And so I encourage all the students to look into the stories of whatever song you might come across, like learn about the background of the song, because that is what's most important. It's like you have to kind of live in this sort of emotion that the song was written for. And if you don't portray that, then that defeats the whole purpose of the song. So getting good at music is like it's like a language. It's a specific language that portrays different emotions through just like different sounds. So if the song is slow and it's a ballad, then it's probably something about love or sadness. So you have to be able to express that through your own emotional medium for the song to actually come alive. And that's for an exciting song. That's for, a horror song. Like you have to be able to express that same emotion that the song is written for, and to be able to interpret that through your own, I guess, expression. So that was kind of the biggest thing that I've learned in the recent years, because you know when you're a musician, it's hard to sort of express like those emotions all the time, so like you would just go gig to gig, like kind of like playing passively. Like it's easy to kind of develop this passive emotion about like music, especially if you're playing like pretty frequently. So just remember that like this is an expression of your of your emotions, of what you go through the daily. And like the more you express these emotions through the music, the more valid it becomes and the more you feel good about yourself playing it. So
Thank you, Kasan. What was the name of the Duke Ellington tune again?
oh yeah, I'll type it in the chat.
Cool. Michael, what about you? What piece of wisdom or advice do you have?
When I was studying with Jerry Allen, the last lesson that we had together was kind of a wrap up of our time together lesson. And we had spent 5 years studying the music of the masters, doing transcriptions. And the last lesson, she told me that I essentially needed to develop an internal compass of what I felt like as a musician and who I was as a musician, and that I should follow that path and that I should follow that. So I think that's kind of in line with what Kasan is saying as well. Like, this is an expression of who you are as an individual. Over the last 15 or so years, that's kind of been my mission, is to like develop my own sound. And I don't think that there's any time too early to be thinking in those terms. You can be multiple things can be true. You can be studying the music of the masters and also kind of aware of or interested in what your own contribution is as well. So, take yourself seriously, treat yourself seriously, treat yourself like an artist, and treat yourself like someone who has something to say, and you might just find something to say.
Thank you very much, Michael. James, how about you?
So I wrote my wisdom comes in the form of questions. So I wrote some down before I actually prepared for this webinar, and so I'm going to read the questions that I have, and they're just for anyone to just reflect on and try to answer. So the first question that came to my mind was, of course, we have to address music. So what am I lacking in my musical ability? So it shouldn't be a tough question. You probably already know right away. That's whatever the first thing that came to your head is probably the number one thing that you should address. So what am I lacking in my musical ability? Then what am I lacking in my non-musical ability? Because our non-musical lives are just as important as our musical lives. There is no separation. Rest his soul. Wayne Shorter said that everything you do is a gig or a performance. So if like you're having a conversation with a friend, you're playing a duet. So he would say, like, if you were checking out at the grocery store, you're playing a duet with the clerk. So like how you conduct yourself outside of music will affect your music at some point. You can't keep those worlds separate. So you want to address, like, what am I lacking in my non-musical life? This very second thing then, question is, who can help me? So if you're looking for help, that's a really good question. For either one of those questions that you first asked, what are you lacking in your musical ability and your non-musical life? Find someone that can help you, and that changes from time to time, and you're never too old or young to learn something from somebody, and seek that out, seek that help out. And then the third question is, who can I help? So I think if you have that mindset, not that you're going to be like a busybody and getting in people's businesses, but like, it goes back to, like, is there a venue that I could collaborate with, that I could help their business out, they could help my business out. Those win-win situations, or as Michael Scott would put it, a win-win-win situation is even better. So yeah, be looking at who can you help, instead of being always centered on yourself. Like, you do have to get yourself together, but then find folks or situations that you can help. And then always asking yourself, what more can you do? How much more can I handle? And like Michael was saying, sometimes you have to trim the fat, and you have to get rid of things that don't serve you. That's one of my other questions, but I think it's good to push and to say, like, what can I do more of? So like I said earlier, I play tennis and I run. Those are questions I ask myself all the time. I'm always trying to get better at one of those things. And I'm asking myself, what more can I do? And if it's running, just try to shave 2 seconds off my mile pace. That's all. I can do that. That's more. That's all it is. It's sometimes it's a very tiny little bit, but that's better than it was before. So what can I eliminate from my life or my routine? And that's a big one. And that was definitely a bit of wisdom that has served me in my career so far. And we're talking about musical and non-musical things. So, if there's some kind of vice that you have, everybody has something that's not serving them. So just ask yourself that, is there something I can eliminate from my life or my routine that isn't serving my overall goals or my well-being? It can be a person, it can be a substance, it can be a situation, a job, I don't know, but ask yourself that question. And then finally, just some resources, some resources that help everybody. And I'll put a plug in for the local musicians union, our local 5. It's a good resource, and it's for the money. It's not very expensive. I think membership is like $170 a year. And if you're in pursuing a career in music, it's probably good to be in the union, and it's a tax write-off anyways. So the government will pay for your membership in the music union via your write-off. So they do a lot of good things. There's not a booking agency. Don't ever think they're going to like find you work. That's not what they're there for. But it's a good resource to have, and it's always good to be, for such a small price, it's a good thing to have. Then there's some books, like time management is a big one. Managing your time. Well, so I found there's a book by Matt Kelly. It's called The Rhythm of Life, and that would be the one I would recommend to anybody in any field. And it's managing your time, budgeting it, and then making sure that you're using your time to serve your goals. So that would be my advice. The Rhythm of Life.
All right. Thank you so much. Jen, I'm writing stuff down while you're talking.
I saw Gary's loose wig earlier, the Lionel Hampton 45. Just want to give Prison Seal a shout out. He's listening. Yeah, see, there it is. He's listening. He had Bluebird up earlier too.
Miles, we're about to wrap it up. If you can make your question super quick, we'll.
I sent it in the chat.
Have you guys played any Gordon Goodwin music? I have. How about you?
Yep, some band. Yep.
No for Michael and Kasan. How about for you? Kasan is too. Cool.
That's really cool.
Yep, he's a talented writer. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. You guys have brought a real interesting discussion to us today, and this is being recorded, so hopefully this will serve not only the purpose for the people here in the room, but for any students that really kind of want to find out what to expect in their careers. I think you guys provided tremendous insight, and on behalf of the Michigan Jazz Festival, thank you very much.
See ya.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us, Scott.
absolutely. As a quick note, the Michigan Jazz Festival is on July 20th or July 16th. I can never remember dates. July 16th, Sunday, July 16th. And there are 3 fundraisers coming up. So support your Michigan Jazz Festival. Come and attend one of the fundraisers. Go to michiganjazzfestival.org to find the dates and the subjects. And thank you everyone for coming, and we hope to see you sometime soon.
Thank you, Scott. Great job.
Thanks.
Bye. Night, Malcolm.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
All right.
All right.
Hi, y'all.
That was great. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Excellent.
Yeah, very nice.
Thank you, Dennis.
I'll be in touch with getting addresses from you guys.
Cool. Thanks, Scott, again.
Yeah, thank you, Kasan. You did an awesome job. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.